the beginning. Marcello was born on February 6, 1910 to Sicilian immigrants Giuseppe and Luigi Minicore, in Tunis, French Tunisia. With his family, Marcello immigrated to the United States in 1911 and settled in a decaying plantation house near Metairie in Jefferson Parish, a suburb of New Orleans. His father adopted a different family name to avoid confusion with his supervisor on the sugar plantation where he had started work. His overseer, also Minicore, chose the appellation Marcello. The family changed all their other names, and Calogero Minicore became Carlos Joseph Marcello. He had 8 siblings: Peter, Rose, Mary, Pascal, Vincent, Joseph Jr., Anthony and Salvador Marcello. Young Marcello turned to petty crime in the French Quarter. He was later imprisoned for masterminding a crew of teenage gangsters who carried out armed robberies in the small towns surrounding New Orleans. At the time, local newspapers compared him to the character of Fagin from Charles Dickens's novel Oliver Twist. This conviction was later overturned. However, the following year he was convicted of assault and robbery and was sentenced to the Louisiana State Penitentiary in West Feliciana Parish for 9 years. He was released after 5 years. In 1938, Marcello was arrested and charged with the sale of more than 10 kilograms, 23 pounds, of marijuana. Despite receiving another lengthy prison sentence and a $76,830 fine, Marcello served less than 10 months and only paid a $400 fine thanks to a deal cut with former Governor Huey Long. On his release from prison, Marcello became associated with Frank Costello, the leader of the Genovese crime family, in New York City. At the time, Costello was involved in transporting illegal slot machines from New York City to New Orleans. Marcello provided the muscle and arranged for the machines to be placed in local businesses. Louisiana crime boss. By the end of 1947, Marcello had taken control of Louisiana's illegal gambling network. He had also joined forces with Genovese crime family associate Meyer Lansky to skim money from some of the most important casinos in the New Orleans area shortly after becoming associated with the Todaro family through marriage. According to former members of the Chicago outfit, Marcello was also assigned a cut of the money skimmed from Las Vegas casinos, in exchange for providing muscle in Florida real estate deals. By this time, Marcello had been selected as the godfather of the New Orleans mafia, by the family's capos and with the commission's approval after the deportation of his predecessor, Silvestro Carola, to Sicily. He held this position for the next 30 years. In a 1975 extortion trial, 2 witnesses described Marcello as the godfather of the New Orleans crime syndicate. Marcello appeared before the U.S. Senate's Kefauver Committee on Organized Crime on January 25, 1951. He pleaded the Fifth Amendment 152 times. The committee called Marcello one of the worst criminals in the country. Marcello continued the family's long-standing tradition of fierce independence from interference by mafiosi in other areas. He enacted a policy that forbade mafiosi from other families from visiting Louisiana without first asking permission. On March 24, 1959, Marcello appeared before the United States Senate's McClellan Committee investigating organized crime. Serving as chief counsel to the committee was Robert F. Kennedy. His brother, Senator John F. Kennedy, was a member of the committee. In response to committee questioning, Marcello invoked the Fifth Amendment and refused to answer any questions relating to his background, activities, and associates. From then on, Marcello became an avowed enemy of the Kennedys. The New Orleans crime family frequently met at Mosca's Italian restaurant in the New Orleans suburb of Avondale, in a building that Marcello had owned. The prosecution. On April 4, 1961, the U.S. Justice Department, under the direction of Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, apprehended Marcello as he made what he assumed was a routine visit to the immigration authorities in New Orleans, then deported him to Guatemala. 2 months later, he was back in New Orleans. Thereafter, he successfully fought efforts by the government to deport him. His immigration lawyer was Jack Wasserman. In November 1963, Marcello was tried for conspiracy to defraud the United States government by obtaining a false Guatemalan birth certificate and conspiracy to obstruct the United States government in the exercise of its right to deport Carlos Marcello. He was acquitted later that month on both charges. However, in October 1964, Marcello was charged with conspiring to obstruct justice by fixing a juror Rudolf Hitler and seeking the murder of a government witness Karl Nohl. Marcello's attorney admitted that Hitler had been bribed but said there was no evidence to connect the bribe with Marcello. Nohl refused to testify against Marcello in the case. Marcello was acquitted of both charges. In September 1966, 13 members of the New York, Louisiana, and Florida crime families were arrested for consorting with known criminals at the La Stella restaurant in Queens, New York. However, the charges were later dropped. Returning to New Orleans a few days later, Marcello was arrested for assaulting an FBI agent. His first trial resulted in a hung jury, but he was retried and convicted. He was sentenced to 2 years but served less than 6 months. In 1981, Marcello, Aubrey W. Young, a former aide to Governor John J. McKeithen, Charles E. Romer, II, former Commissioner of Administration to Governor Edwin Edwards, and 2 other men were indicted in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana in New Orleans with conspiracy, racketeering, and mail-and-wire fraud, in a scheme to bribe state officials to give the 5 men multi-million-dollar insurance contracts. The charges were the result of a Federal Bureau of Investigation probe known as BRULAB. U.S. District Judge Maurice allowed the admission of secretly recorded conversations that he said demonstrated corruption at the highest levels of state government. Marcello and Romer were convicted, but Young and the 2 others were acquitted. The Kennedy assassination. In its 1978 investigation of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the House Select Committee on Assassinations said that it recognized Jack Ruby's murder of Lee Harvey Oswald as a primary reason to suspect organized crime as possibly having involvement in the assassination. In its investigation, the HSCA noted the presence of credible associations relating both Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby to figures having a tenuous relationship with Marcello's crime family or organization. Their report stated, the committee found that Marcello had the motive, means, and opportunity to have President John F. Kennedy assassinated, though it was unable to establish direct evidence of Marcello's complicity. In their book, Fatal Hour, The Assassination of President Kennedy by Organized Crime, authors Richard N. Billings and G. Robert Blakey, who was chief counsel of the House Select Committee on Assassinations and previously special attorney in the Organized Crime and Racketeering section of the Criminal Division of the U.S. Department of Justice under Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, conclude that President Kennedy's murder was planned and carried out by Marcello and conspirators. They claim that their book lays out evidence that has been corroborated by additional sources and official records released in subsequent years. In his 1989 book, Mafia Kingfish, Carlos Marcello and the Assassination of John F. Kennedy, author John H. Davis implicates Marcello in the assassination of Kennedy. According to Davis, Oswald and Ruby had strong ties to Marcello. Davis claims that Ruby ran Dallas businesses for Marcello. Lieutenant Joseph Campisi. In his 1994 autobiography Mob Lawyer, attorney Frank Regano says that he relayed a message in 1963 from Teamsters Union leader Jimmy Hoffa to Marcello and Santo Traficant, the mafia boss of Florida, urging the 2 mafia bosses to kill Kennedy. Regano later claimed that 4 days before Traficant died, the mob boss described to Regano how he and Marcello organized the murder of President Kennedy. In his 2013 book The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination, Lamar Waldron claimed that Marcello masterminded the assassination of Kennedy. According to Waldron, Marcello admitted his involvement to 2 other inmates during a fit of rage in the prison yard at the Federal Correctional Institution in Texarkana, Texas. In his book, Waldron also presented the account of Marcello's prison cellmate, Jack Van Lanningham, who claimed in 1985 that Marcello bragged to him that he had masterminded the Kennedy assassination while planting red herrings to confuse the press and embarrass the FBI and CIA into suppressing evidence. According to Waldron, Marcello arranged for 2 hitmen to assassinate entering the United States from Canada and Europe, while setting up Oswald as the fall guy and ordering the subsequent murder of various conspirators and witnesses who risked turning informants, including mobsters Johnny Rosselli and Sanjay Khanna. According to criminal underworld investigator and author Charles Brandt, while in Texarkana Federal Prison, during a 2-day period in which Marcello was having blood pressure problems and was sent to the prison hospital, Marcello spoke to medical attendants as if they were members of his crime family. On 3 occasions he told them he had just met in New York with Genovese Capotoni, Provenzano, and they would soon be celebrating because they were going to get that smiling MF Kennedy in Dallas. Death. Thoroughly in 1989, Marcello suffered a series of strokes. In July, in a surprise move, the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals threw out his Brilab conviction. One judge denied this reversal, but his decision in turn was overruled. In October, after having served 6 years and 6 months of his sentence, Marcello was released. Carlos Marcello died on March 2, 1993. To this day, the Carlos Marcello theory is considered the most plausible cause of Kennedy's death. The end.
Thanks for watching the best stories ever told. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you thought that story was crazy, click this video for a really fascinating tale.